Dude, I love all of those things.
Obsessive dedication and religious fanaticism is not an idea exclusive to the West, as cults have a history of emerging from even the most unexpected of places. This is exactly what occurred in the case of the Aum Shinrikyo cult during the late 1980s in Japan. After the Second World War, Japan's society began developing rapidly, and those who could not keep up were left behind. As cities, technology, and the government faced rapid changes, many grew critical of the new world that they were faced with. And this mix of exclusion and mistrust, paired with the progression and accessibility of chemical warfare, was the perfect breeding ground to create.
Dude, I don't know why it's always so interesting to hear like how other cultures, you know, because all I ever hear about is just, you know, American shit, like American QAnon or American wackos and shit like that. It is so interesting to hear that that shit still happens in different countries. You know, other countries have a QAnon. Other countries have these weird ass cults. Obviously, I mean, I'm not saying that that's like a surprise. Like, obviously it's true. It's just something I don't really think about.
Create the deadliest cult Japan had ever seen. Shoko Asahara was born on March 2nd, 1955. He was one of 9 children in an impoverished family living in the Kumamoto Prefecture. His birth name was Chizuo Matsumoto, which he later changed, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll be referring to him as Shoko Asahara from now on. From birth, Asahara developed infantile glaucoma, visually impairing him, a condition that would leave him almost fully blind, and in his later years, forced Asahara to attend a boarding school for blind children. Although, even from a young age, Asahara seemed to like the idea of power. He was even known to be a bully at his boarding school, physically injuring his classmates or taking their money. But as Asahara grew older, he leaned towards a more mental and spiritual lifestyle. He had graduated from junior college in 1975 and turned towards the study of acupuncture, before ultimately devoting his time to studying religion in the early 1980s. But ironically, as Asahara
Dude, why do cults are always religion? Why can't there be a cult for like Grimace? Why can't there be like a Grimace cult or some shit, you know? Why can't there be like a Don Cheadle cult? There's like people who are obsessed with Don Cheadle, you know? Why not? Why has it always got to be religion? Come on, spice it up. Spice it up, cults. We call ourselves the Cheetos. Start one? Guys, start a cult in my name. Don't actually do that.
He grew dissatisfied with the traditional Japanese Buddhism and leaned more towards a mix of Tibetan Buddhism, Christianity, and his own prophecies instead, preferring a form of religion without Japanese influence. He meshed this new branch of theology with his own knowledge of meditation and yoga, and would soon go on to create his own religious organization. But for the meantime, Asahara had to start small. In 1984, Asahara, now a guru, had created a one-room yoga and meditation class, a platform he would soon use to introduce his own religious ideas to his students.
Yo, hold up! Like, damn, this guy over here. What?
1984, Asahara, now a guru, had created a one-room yoga and
Yo, slow this down real quick. Like, he's getting his back blown out right now.
meditation class. A platform he would
and it's smooth as shit. Watch this.
Introduce his own religious
like, look at that back bend.
ideas to his students.
This goes right back up. Damn.
Class was based in Shibuya City, a special ward in Tokyo, known to house 2 of the busiest railway stations in the world.
He definitely listens to Dixon Dallas.
Would soon take into account. Nevertheless, Asahara had initially named the class Aum Shinsen no Kai, before later changing it to Aum Shinrikyo, or Supreme Truth in English.
I knew that.
In 1989,
I watched
after
anime.
constant pressure by members of Aum Shinrikyo, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government finally recognized the group as a religious corporation, a title that would grant the cult immunity against investigations into its activities. This was a major turning point for the cult. Recognition as a legitimate organization meant that Aum could increase its reach and devious practices without being investigated. This formality would later prove to be a severe lapse in judgment on the part of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. But for the meantime, Aum Shinrikyo, now more of a cult than a class, was growing rapidly, as was modern Japanese culture. With the
Totally
increasing
not weird.
popularity of anime and pop culture magazines,
No!
Asahara saw the perfect opportunity to reach Japan's youngest and most impressionable demographic. After being recognized as a legitimate corporation, Ohm's membership grew exponentially, as did their net worth. Most members of the cult were young adults who had seen the group in magazines or flyers. One of Asahara's most popular selling points was his apparent ability to levitate for hours at a time. He also claimed to be able to cleanse the sins.
Totally legit. His hair is totally not showing that he's falling down. Guys, it's totally legit. Look at this.
To levitate for hours at a time.
He's really...
He also claimed to be able to cleanse the sins of members, and often prophesied of a third world war or a nuclear apocalypse in which only the members of Ohm would survive. This,
of course.
along with its recognition as a legitimate corporation, accelerated Ohm's growth rapidly, and by the early 1990s, Ohm had amassed around 10,000 members, and their net worth had reached over 500 million yen. But as Ohm grew in net worth and members, so did their opposition. Over the years, former cult members had begun to speak out against Ohm Shinrikyo's zero-tolerance policy and its torture of members who tried to leave the cult without permission. There had been rumors spreading around the general public that members of Ohm had been subjected to inhumane conditions and been experimented on. Of course, these rumors were all true, but because of the aforementioned title as a religious corporation, no major investigations could be launched. With no action from the government against Ohm, more and more anti-Ohm groups started forming. Those who had relatives or family members in the cult were becoming increasingly anxious about their safety. Tsutsumi Sakamoto, a prominent lawyer of multiple anti-Ohm groups, had publicly denounced the cult and claimed that its members were being held there against their will. But as Sakamoto began working on a class action lawsuit against the cult, he and his whole family seemingly disappeared from their apartment in Yokohama, the second most populated city in Japan. At the time, no one had connected Sakamoto's disappearance to the Ohm Shinrikyo cult. However, in later years, police would soon discover that on November 3, 1989, only a few months after being declared a religious corporation, multiple senior members of the Ohm Shinrikyo cult drove to Sakamoto's home and injected him, his wife, and his 14-month-old baby with potassium chloride.
What?
A lethal injection that would force the body into cardiac arrest, killing all three of them. They then dumped the bodies in 3 different prefectures across Japan, so that in case the bodies were ever found by police, they wouldn't link the murders. They'd opened a new headquarters in Kamikuishiki on the
Dude, it is so crazy, like how back then it was so it was so easy to get away with murder. It feels like anytime we hear about these stories, it's not even that long ago. Like it's like the 90s or 80s or 70s. People just get away with murder all the time. Just like people just find dead bodies in random spots. Like, oh, how did he die? Oh, that guy's walking away. I wonder if it was him. And he just gets away with it. Like, it's crazy.
Mount Fuji. The cult's recruitment system had proved successful.
Thank God we have the internet and videos and shit now.
With more and more people joining the cult and with more influence than ever before, Asahara decided to run for
that's
parliament.
creepy.
In 1990, Asahara and 24 other members of his inner circle announced that they would be candidates in this year's Japanese Diet election under their own party, the Shinrito, in English, the Truth Party. Although Asahara's cult had been growing faster than ever before, his campaign of singing and dancing in downtown Tokyo wasn't attracting enough attention.
Yeah, I'd say
Ultimately, Asahara only received around 1,700 votes out of 500,000 votes cast. To add to the humiliation, some members of his cult hadn't even voted for his party. It's speculated that Ohm's radical prophecies of apocalypses had hindered their ability to gain votes from the general public.
But how?
Nevertheless, after the cult's humiliating loss in the election...
Telling everyone there's going to be an apocalypse in a few years? I don't know. That might not be the best candidate to vote for.
Shoko Asahara started to become more violent, and as
actually, you know what? If Trump said that, I'd vote for him.
Activities took a drastic turn for the worse. But before we get into the cult's later attacks on the Japanese public, we need to establish what the cult's beliefs were. Essentially, Shoko Asahara preached that there were multiple levels of consciousness that a person could reach. Asahara, of course, claimed that he had the highest level of consciousness, and that other people could raise their consciousness as well if they joined the cult and followed the divine teachings of their supreme master, Shoko Asahara. Members of the cult had to hand over almost all of their worldly possessions to Asahara and were subjected to what the cult called survival training. Here, members would be
it's just so scary how easy people are manipulated like this. It's just
subjected to prolonged
and it's
submersion
so
underwater,
common.
Drug abuse, and mental trauma. Asahara believed that a major war would break out between Japan and the United States in the following years, involving weapons of mass destruction. This war, he believed, would
I want to see a cult leader be like, yeah, I don't know shit, come join my cult. Oh, I'm sure people would.
Members who tried to leave the cult were brutalized, and in most cases, murdered. Outsiders who publicly spoke out against the cult, as we previously mentioned, were usually assassinated by senior members of Ohm. Asahara motivated his members by telling them stories of his own clairvoyant-like experiences. He claimed that he was able to levitate and fly around rooms on command. However, in all the pictures...
Is that him levitating?
Provided, it's clear that he's either jumping off the floor or the picture has been manipulated in some way.
I'm convinced. Same. No. Dear.
To recruit more young men.
No way! They created their own animation studio? Dude, this is the anime I want to watch.
Studio to make a 10-episode anime series named Shuetsu Sakai. It consisted mostly of propaganda and stories about Shoko Asahara and his quest for the supreme truth. This, along with multiple TV appearances, is what made Ohm's recruitment campaign more successful.
He's doing a Naruto hand sign! Is that the substitution jutsu? What the fuck? He knows that? That singing's amazing. When are you reviewing this masterpiece? Soon.
By the early 1990s,
Write it down, guys.
Ohm
Write
had
it
not
down.
only recruited members of the youth, but accomplished professionals as well. Chemists, scientists, biologists, and even officers from the Japanese Self-Defense Force had joined the Ohm Shinrikyo cult because of its incredibly successful propaganda campaign.
Oh, look at him! Oh.
In 1992, looking to recruit even more people to join Ohm, Asahara and several cult members went to Moscow, Russia to open a branch of the cult, a move that would cause a spike in members for Ohm, adding around 20,000 members to the cult. They'd also forged connections with several Russian government officials, like the then Vice President of Russia, Alexander Rutskoy, and Chairman Khusbalatov. As Ohm became more and more powerful in Japan and Russia, Asahara decided to expand the cult in new ways. After making
Put this in your disturbing animation iceberg. I was actually about to say that. I might go back and write down what that anime was and throw it in there because that's some good shit.
In Russia, Asahara gained access to various military
That's obscure
weapons,
and pretty
training,
good.
And because Ohm still believed that a third world war was imminent, the group began militarizing rapidly. In the early 1990s, Ohm had apparently began planning to manufacture as many as 1,000 AK-74s and cartridges, and had given around 200 of its members military
Wait, they have an
training.
AK-74? I thought there was only a 47.
Seemed like it was preparing for war. Although almost all of its efforts to mass-produce firearms ultimately failed, Ohm was much more successful with another type of weapon.
Chemical?
In the spring of 1993, Ohm had started acquiring resources to mass-produce sarin, a colorless, odorless nerve agent that can lead to vomiting, loss of consciousness, convulsions, paralysis, and asphyxiation when in contact with skin. Suffice to say, sarin was a very dangerous chemical weapon. Ohm had also considered researching other chemicals like VX, Taban, and Soman, all of them being very toxic chemical substances. Nevertheless, Ohm had begun researching and producing these chemical agents under the supervision of various chemists who had previously joined the cult, like Masami Tsuchiya, a member who'd gotten his master's degree in chemistry a few years prior.
Sorry. Oh god.
This, along with the cult's development of biological weapons like botulism toxins and anthrax, meant that they were ready to launch their first major chemical attack in Tokyo.
Oh no.
On June 29, 1993, 5 residents living in Kamaido, Tokyo reported a foul odor to the local health authorities.
It's Resident
Upon
Evil.
investigation, officers found that the smell was coming from an 8-story building in the area, known to be Om Shinrikyo's headquarters. The smell persisted throughout the next day, and the residents, now fed up with Om's practices, registered 41 complaints to local health authorities to investigate the origin of the smell. But when authorities asked for permission to enter the cult's headquarters and investigate the smell, they were denied entry. After one more day of the foul odor and 118 more complaints filed by residents, Shoko Asahara and his cult were forced out of the area. But more than 2 weeks would go by until city inspectors investigated the cult's headquarters, and by that time, the members and equipment had been long gone. Since no one had been injured or died from the foul odor, this incident was largely forgotten, until, in the following years, several former Om cult members revealed that a gas they'd been testing, anthrax, had been emanating on the roof of the building. Their intention was to cause an inhalation anthrax epidemic among the residents living in the area. Although their plan had turned into a complete disaster, the Om Shinrikyo cult realized that testing chemical weapons in Japan was too risky. So as a way to cover up their research, they bought a remote sheep station in Western Australia, where they test their chemicals on cattle, ultimately killing 29 sheep in their experiments. Now, with a new way to test their chemical weapons away from the scrutiny of the Japanese government...
That literally a cult is basically just making mass, like, destruction warfare shit right here. That is so terrifying that, like, just a small group of people can do crazy shit like this and get away with
and his cult were now more experienced and ready to test their chemical weapons again, this time in a quiet neighborhood in the city of Matsumoto.
That's why chemical shit is so scary, because it's just like anybody can do it.
Matsumoto housed 3
if they know what they're
judges who
doing.
were expected to rule against the cult in a land dispute, which made them prime targets for Om, whose plan was to release sarin gas into the courthouse. However, a last-minute change in plans led the cult to target the judge's 3-story apartment building where they lived. So, on June 27, 1994, members of Om drove down a small neighborhood road in Matsumoto. They used a refrigerated truck to release a cloud of sarin, which would turn into an aerosol and float into the homes of the judges. However, in the process of this targeted attack, everyone in the neighborhood
Dude, that is so complex. That is
contact
crazy.
with the free-floating aerosol was affected. 5 people were found dead in their homes. 2 people had died right after hospital admission, and another had slipped into a coma for 14 years, passing away in 2008. A total of 274 people were treated in a hospital following the attack, one of the largest attacks that Om had conducted at the time. The following investigation turned up little to no information. In fact, police had accused a 44-year-old man named Yoshiyuki Kono of setting up the attack on the neighborhood. It was found that he had several chemicals in his possession, and despite not having the technical know-how to commit such a large-scale attack, he was named the sole perpetrator. Kono had received death threats and hate mail, but in the following year...
So they didn't even fucking know who it was?
After discovering that Om had carried out the attack, Kono received public apologies from all news agencies that had accused him, but did not get an apology from the Nagano police force until 2002. It would take around a year for the Om Shinrikyo cult to be implicated in this incident, so, at the time, Om considered this a victory. They'd successfully injured hundreds of residents and killed at least 7, while, at the same time, testing their sarin for the first time. This, to them, proved that they were ready for bigger and better targets.
Dear Lord.
Om was nearing the peak of their power, with the successful manufacturing of biological and chemical weapons, the semi-successful production of illegal drugs like LSD, and their distribution of these drugs to the Yakuza, Japanese organized crime.
God damn, they're like in everything
now. The empire that was once Om would come crumbling down. In early 1995, a wealthy cult member had escaped from Om's headquarters with the help of her brother, 69-year-old Kiyoshi Kariya. As a result, Om members kidnapped Kariya off of a Tokyo street and brought him to their headquarters, where they drugged and interrogated him for information about his sister, the escapee. However, In the process of the interrogation, Kariya had overdosed, and his body
Oh
was
my
then burned in an
God.
incinerator. Among other factors, Kariya's disappearance had sparked a major police investigation into the Aum
Dude, good on him that he didn't break, though.
Shinrikyo cult, with plans to simultaneously raid all of
That's
Aum's
a
facilities in
badass
March
right there. That's a
1995.
Giga Chad.
But 3 days before the raid, Asahara was tipped off by cult members in the Japanese Self-Defense Force. So, a preemptive strike was planned to be carried out in the Tokyo subway during its rush hour. Aum immediately started producing large quantities of liquid sarin, as well as planning their attack. On the morning of March 20th, 1995, 5 Aum Shinrikyo members carrying packets of liquid sarin wrapped in newspaper boarded 3 different lines in the Tokyo subway: the Hibiya, Chiyoda, and Marunouchi line. The 3 lines were expected to converge at the central Kasumigaseki station, where hundreds of thousands of Japanese citizens passed by every day. The station was also walking distance from Tokyo's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Finance, Labor, and Health, as well as both the Tokyo Police and National Police Agency, hinting at Aum's hatred towards the Japanese
Ballin
government.
covered this?
So, during the morning rush hour in Tokyo, their plan was set into action. 48-year-old Ikuo Hayashi boarded the southbound train on the Chiyoda line, and after riding the train for 3 stops, he punctured one of 2 sarin packages with the sharpened tip of an umbrella, before disembarking a short while later.
Okay,
This
that...
allowed the
I don't know
sarin
why this was... Is that... It looked like a package of cocaine. What the...
embarking a short while later. This allowed the sarin gas to leak into the air in the subway train, forcing all the passengers in the compact and poorly ventilated area to begin inhaling the poisonous gas. For the next few minutes, the train continued on its scheduled path, but after multiple complaints from passengers of foul smells and liquid sarin spilling onto the floor, it was taken out of service. The effects of sarin gas on the body can range from mild to severe, but the sheer concentration of sarin gas, as well as the compact area of distribution, causes a gradual buildup of symptoms in the body, starting from discomfort about the smell to fits of uncontrollable coughing, choking, and eventually vomiting. At around the same time, 31-year-old Kenichi Hirose boarded the westbound train in the Marunouchi line before puncturing his sarin package after 4 stops. The train unknowingly continued on its scheduled path before 2 severely injured passengers had to be removed. Despite this, the train continued until it reached its destination, then departed again in the opposite direction, before finally being taken out of service. This specific attack left 1 passenger dead and around 350 injured. On the same subway line and around the same time,
I was expecting more people to die, not gonna lie.
The 5th car headed eastbound, before slightly poking a hole in one of 2 sarin packages, disembarking 1 stop later.
Did these guys not die?
Because Yokoyama hadn't majorly punctured either of his sarin packages, passengers
They probably had
as
gas
well as
masks,
staff
to be
hadn't
fair.
realized what had happened. So the train had continued until the end of its line, where it was eventually evacuated and searched. But searchers hadn't found either of the sarin packages, so the train departed in the opposite direction at 8:32 a.m. But after passengers started falling ill,
His puncture
station
game was
attendants
weak.
finally found
True.
the liquid sarin, before promptly mopping the floor and continuing on the scheduled route for another hour. The train was finally taken out of service at 9:27 a.m., leaving no casualties but 200 people in serious condition.
God, thank
final
God only
Hibiya
1
subway
person
line,
died. That's
University
crazy.
graduate Toru
I was
Toyoda
honestly
boarded the
expecting, like,
northeastbound
at
train
least
at around
10
8
people.
a.m. before puncturing both of his sarin packages and promptly leaving at the next station. He was only on the train for
I'm
a
sure
total of
people
2
are gonna be
minutes,
dealing with,
but in
like,
his fatal attack, he left 1
shit the rest
passenger
of their
dead
lives,
and
like,
532 others injured as the train continued on its route for 3 more
Physical
stops.
ailments the rest of their life
Even
from
then,
this.
only the front car was evacuated. The train continued until the next stop.
This
where it
would be
was
considered a
eventually taken
YouTube
out of
prank.
service.
Yes.
And one of the last and deadliest attacks took place on the opposite
Guys,
end of the
we're gonna
Hibiya
take some
subway line.
sarin on this
Senior
train and
university
see how
graduate
many
Yasuo
people
Hayashi
survive.
boarded the southbound train, but unlike the other attackers, Hayashi carried 3 sarin packages instead of 2.
Oh, great!
According to various sources, he had volunteered to use a 3rd flawed sarin package to show his loyalty to the group. Nevertheless, having boarded the train, Hayashi repeatedly punctured 2 of his 3 packages before promptly disembarking. By the time the train had reached the next stop, passengers had noticed the sarin packages leaking fluid onto the floor, prompting 1 passenger to kick it out onto the subway platform. This seemingly harmless action
Oh,
allowed for
no.
the sarin gas to infiltrate the air in the subway platform, where dozens of other citizens stood waiting for the train, effectively forcing even more Tokyo residents to be exposed to the gas. This simple action increased the death toll by taking 4 more lives, but not before the people in the train started to feel the effects of the sarin. At 8:10 a.m., one passenger began feeling overwhelmed by the effects of the sarin and pressed the emergency stop button on the train. But because the train was traveling in a tunnel at the time, they had no choice but to continue until they reached the next station, and by that time, multiple passengers had succumbed to the exposure of sarin. In total, 14 people died in the attack. 12 of them had died on the day of the attack. One died the following day, and another had died in 2020 after the exposure to sarin left them bedridden for 25 years.
Oh, God.
With around 6,500 people injured, this attack was one of the worst cases of domestic terrorism in Japanese history. After the attack, a media frenzy swiftly ensued as the cult entered the public eye. Due to this and a number of other factors, in the following years, the Aum Shinrikyo cult would completely fall apart.
Still, if their chemists had been better, much worse would have happened. Imagine anthrax. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking it was like instantaneous death type shit. Like that could have been thousands of people dead.
Multiple full-scale raids were carried out at the Aum headquarters in Tokyo, Kamikuishiki, and Russia. During these raids, police found and seized various explosives, chemical weapons, illegal drugs, and even prisoners who were found in cells in various buildings, most of whom had been part of anti-Aum groups or had been connected to an escaped member. But this didn't stop Aum from trying to carry out even more attacks in a desperate attempt to try and distract police. On May 5th, 1995, a few months after the subway attack, sodium cyanide was found at a public restroom in Tokyo's Shinjuku station, but the device, made out of 2 plastic bags containing different chemicals, was quickly found and seized by police. On May 16th, a letter bomb was mailed to the governor of Metropolitan Tokyo, and upon opening, the letter exploded, blowing the fingers off of the governor's left hand. 5 Aum members were swiftly arrested and charged for the attack. Aum had attempted to commit more terrorist attacks, but most were unsuccessful. The empire that was once a religious corporation worth multi-million yen was now deemed a terrorist group in Russia, Canada, the US, and many more.
I don't know how I've never heard of this cult group. That's crazy.
Around 2 months, Shoko Asahara was finally arrested after he was found at one of Aum's headquarters, beginning the quote trial of the century as dubbed by Japanese media. Asahara was found guilty on 13 of his 17 charges, as police were just now uncovering his earlier attacks, such as the Sakamoto family murder and the Matsumoto sarin attack.
God damn.
Ultimately, Asahara was sentenced to death by hanging in 2004.
Good.
In 2018, he was executed, along with many other senior members of Aum.
Good.
Since then, the Aum Shinrikyo cult has been depicted in video games like the story of Kamikuishiki Village, a Japanese Dojin game that recently rose in popularity because of speculation that it was made as a recruitment strategy for the cult. However, it was later revealed that the single-player game was satirical, aimed at making fun of the cult by using real footage from the attack to dramatize their great failure. The Aum Shinrikyo cult terrorized the Japanese population for years, committing assassinations, feeding corruption, and unleashing indiscriminate terror attacks on the people of Tokyo. Even now, Aum Shinrikyo has
Add your disturbing video games iceberg. I know, right? It just keeps going.
Attack in 1995, the cult changed its name to Aleph and is now more private than ever before, although it's now under
so it
intense
still
supervision
exists
by the Japanese police. After unleashing a fatal attack on the public, Japan's most dangerous cult was finally brought down. And although the threat was trivialized in later years, the danger that this group posed to the Japanese public cannot be forgotten.
Jesus Christ, man. That's fucking crazy. That goes so deep. There's video games, there's animes. These people were like fucking with the government and shit. That's crazy.
Now it's time to walk away. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Did you laugh or cry or maybe subscribed? I'll thank you either way. You know I will miss you. I hope you return. Tell your friend or your mother to get me more views, please.